bunch of little icons there. There's Q&A, there's polling, and there's chat. So just hit the chat window and introduce yourselves. So your first name and where you're calling from. So I'm just going to do it here in the chat window. Bunch of little icons there. There's Q&A, there's polling. We're getting some feedback there, Rob.
Yeah, I got it.
Canada. Perfect. Yeah, you guys are figuring it out. And after you guys have done that, there's another button on the bottom of your screen that's called polling. And we've got a little question for you before we start the program is, what are you guys struggling with the most with your property design right now? So it could be goal setting, goal execution, accessing relevant information and tools, too much information, analysis paralysis, prioritizing your time, prioritizing your money, or burnout. You'll find all of those answers in the polling key below. So hit that, hit your multiple choice question, introduce yourselves in the chat window. We're just gonna wait until the Zoom room fills up here. We've got a totally sold out webinar tonight. There should be over 100 people on the call. It's gonna be a great call tonight.
Yeah, awesome. It's we've been talking about this webinar for a long time, so we're super excited to be here with you guys. And one of the things that we've been experimenting with Zoom over the last few years, and we've noticed that your experience ends up being a lot better when you interact with each other. So make sure you're actively using the chat, talking to each other, letting each other know what your problems and opportunities are, where you're currently living, what you're designing. And one thing I want to just make sure that you're really clear on in the Zoom panel is that there's a Q&A button and there's a chat button. And the Q&A button is where I want you to put all your questions. Tonight, we're going to answer a lot of questions. And so the Q&A question feature in Zoom makes sure that your questions don't get lost in the hundreds of chats that inevitably will show up this evening. So make sure you're putting your questions into the Q&A and introducing yourself in the chat window, and that will make sure that we don't lose your important questions. So thank you so much. We're going to get started here right away. So one more thing, just another reminder, make sure that you're filling out the poll. The poll should be sitting in front of you right now. A bunch of you have already answered it. This is going to help us to tailor tonight's talk to you guys. So we're always trying to kind of teach on the fly in a sense. We've prepared something, but because we've been teaching this for quite a while now, we have the ability to manipulate and move things around a little bit so that it's going to give you guys the most amount of value.
Perfect. So we've got lots of folks introducing themselves. We've got lots of folks from Alberta here. We've got North Carolina in the US, Idaho, Indiana, Northwest Ireland, Canmore, New York, Ontario, Springstead. So we still people coming in. So if you're just joining us now, my name is Takota Coen, and we got Rob Avis here. So if you check out the bottom of your screen, there's a bunch of little icons there. First, head over to the chat window, introduce yourselves, where you're from. Next, answer the polling question that we've got up, which is, what are you struggling with the most with your property design right now? And then if you have any Q&As that you'd love to get answered tonight, make sure you put those in the Q&A section. There's a little icon that's separate for that. Don't put it in the chat window because they can tend to get lost there. But you can feel free to use the chat window to discuss other things with other participants, share jokes, whatever you guys like. But if you have any specific questions, make sure you put those in the Q&A box.
And just before we get started here, I'm going to ask you guys a joke. Why can't you hear a pterodactyl peeing? Because the P is silent. All right, cool. Let's get started here, Takota. We got lots to cover tonight, and so I'm going to let you kick it off. And yeah, give her.
Perfect. Okay, so why don't we answer the poll here to start that off with. So one of the things that that, we're always asking people this question is, what are you guys struggling with the most? And, more often than not, it's actually a pretty even split like we've got here tonight, is that these are all pretty common things that folks are struggling with is prioritizing your time, your money, analysis paralysis, information overload, goal execution, goal setting. But if we look at all of those problems, they all have one thing in common, which is they all kind of revolve around the challenge of complexity, which is probably the single biggest problem that we see. Regenerative land managers, whether they're large or small, that's what they're struggling with is how do we manage the complexity of designing, managing, implementing, and monitoring their land. So tonight we're going to be focusing, hopefully, to help give you guys some tools and tips for how you can combat that complexity on your own land and start designing and managing the regenerative property of your dreams. And to do that, we're going to be using our own farm here in Farintosh, Alberta, as a case study for how we've been using the tools and the process that Rob, Michelle, and I have been working on our own place here. So should we keep the poll open, Rob, or do you want to close that?
Yeah, let's keep it open because people are still filtering in.
Perfect. Okay. So just going to get rid of that. Share my screen. Actually, we forgot something, Rob.
That is true.
We wanted to start out with some special announcements. Rob, do you want to go through those?
Yeah. So really quickly here before we get into the case study, guys. So we just wanted to let you guys know that we've launched. We're going to be writing a book on this whole subject. So we're so excited about this process that we're going to share with you guys tonight that we've signed a book deal with New Society Publishers. So it's coming out next year, which is awesome. And that at the end of tonight's program, we are launching our new adaptive habitat land design course. And if you stay till the end, we have a $200 consultancy with Takota and myself, and we're going to draw one name out of all the people that stick to the end. So you want to make sure that you do that. We're going to go through the case study as Takota was just bringing up and teasing you guys with. And then I'm going to put a couple thoughts together on that case study and just kind of round it out a little bit. And then we will talk a little bit about the guided and guaranteed program. If you're brand new to the Adaptive Habitat Land Design program, this program is freely available. There's a free version of it, I should say, that's self-guided, so you don't get the benefit of having an engineer and a farmer on your side. And so I'm not sure how many of you have gone through that program, but you can find that program at contourmapgenerator.com. And so tonight we're basically going through a case study so that you guys can see what can come out of the back end of that. And if you have been going through that program, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions about the self-guided program that you potentially been going through, so you can get some clarity on some of those things as well. So that will finish off with Q&A.
Yeah, and so make sure you guys stay through to the very end, because that's when I'm going to be announcing whoever has won the $200 free consultancy. It's Rob and myself. But if you're not on the call at the end when we announce the draw, we're just going to go to the next person on the list. We've got a random number generator, and we're just going to pick people at random. So make sure you stay on until the very end. All right, let's kick this thing off. Just out of curiosity in the chat window, who here has actually had a chance to go through the Adaptive Habitat Self-Study Program? Throw that up in the chat window there. Okay, so if you guys aren't familiar with Google Earth Pro, this is actually a free open source program. It used to be several $100s a year, but a couple years ago, Google Earth made it open source. And this is one of the tools that Rob and I have been using in our consultancy work. We've actually created this entire workflow that we've started a free online course called Adaptive Habitat. But we also have a guided and guaranteed program where we take people through each of these steps that we're going to be showing you guys tonight to go through all these exercises so you can actually build all the things that we're going to show you for my own farm for your property. So to start off with, I'm just going to zoom in on our farm here. So our farm is located in Farintosh, Alberta, Canada. And this is home for me right here. So I'm going to start off by just quickly showing a picture of the adaptive habitat process if you're not familiar with it. The entire process is based on 5 really simple steps. You start off by clarifying your vision and your values. You diagnose your property for its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and its ability to meet your vision and values. Then you design the difference or the gaps between those, between what you want and what you have. And then you create a strategic implementation plan that's going to help move you towards the vision that you've stated without sacrificing any of the values that you have. And then the 5th step is creating some kind of management and monitoring process to make sure that you're on the right track. Because, you know, because of the nature of complexity, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And another really common problem we've seen folks struggling with is, you know, they'll be 10, 15, 20 years into designing a property, and you know, they're in a rat race, and they've kind of forgotten why they're doing what they're doing, and they're just running around putting out fires all the time. So it's really important to have some kind of a management and monitoring process to make sure that you are indeed moving towards that vision and values that you said you wanted to move towards. So these 5 steps now is what I'm going to be walking you through via the open source Google Earth Pro tool that we've created, which is just a plug-in workflow of literally 100 or more different exercises that you can get for free at www.contourmapgenerator.com. Log onto that program, get a free contour map, and you'll be automatically entered into the free program to get this tool. So to start off with step 1, which is clarifying your vision, values, and your resources, I just thought I would share, you know, what our vision and values is for our farm. And this is based on some of the exercises that we give out in the program. So our vision for our farm is a healthy planet with healthy people with a healthy future. And this is based off of the 3 ethics of permaculture, which is earth care, people care, and future care. And the things that we really value on our farm are things like biodiversity, the concept of interrelatedness and relationships. There's actually a word, Mitikayo Yasin, which is a Plains Cree word that literally means all our relations. Reverence, redundancy, anti-fragility, fairness, accountability, adaptation, reciprocity, self-care. These are all you know, the 10 most important words that we came up with that are important to us as a farm team here. And then our mission as a farm is to regenerate the health of the planet and its people through nutrient-dense food, permaculture education, and an empowered community. And then we've got some indicators here that we will come back to in step 5, which is the things that we're going to monitor that are going to help let us know that we're actually moving towards that vision of a healthy planet, healthy people, and a healthy future without sacrificing these values that we've said here. So the indicators, the positive and negative indicators are that biodiversity is increasing, the nutrient density of the food that we're producing is increasing in terms of flavor and variety, and that the farm work that we're engaged in is effortless and invigorating. And the negative indicators, the things that we need to watch for to make sure that we know we're moving in the wrong direction, is that biodiversity is decreasing, the nutrient density of our food is decreasing, and the farm work feels like drudgery. And so for folks who aren't familiar with our farm, I farm with my parents, Michael and Laura, and we've been organic farmers since 1988, which is when my parents started to notice the declining health of our land, our animals, and eventually themselves. And my mom got sick one day when my dad was out spraying a herbicide in a field. And it was at that point that they started to ask themselves some really tough questions about how they were managing the land. And again, this is like 31 years ago, they decided to quit cold turkey. And since then, we haven't used any biocides or chemical fertilizers on our land. So that's step 1 is really figuring out what is it that drives you? What are you doing when you feel your best? What's the thing that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and why are you managing this property in the first place? What's the really high level goal? And once you've got that, we've got a whole series of exercises that we walk folks through in the guided and guaranteed program, as well as the free program, that will help you pull out and clarify your vision and your values. So that's step one there, and I'm going to dive into step two here, which is really the meat of where this program starts to come together. So step two diagnosis is all about looking at your property and your resources that you have available to help meet your vision and values, and diagnosing them in a subjective manner so that you can figure out what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats you have for all the resources that are available to you. One of the frameworks we use is called the 8 forms of capital. We're not going to get into that tonight, but I'm going to show you some of the really amazing things you can do in Google Earth Pro to help diagnose some other categories in your property, things like climate, geography, water, access, structures, fencing, flora, business, technology, and soil. So we're going to start off with climate here, which is you have the ability to, with this tool, you have the ability to import in images and information. Oh, that's why. From anywhere. So these are just images from online that show some of the climatic data for our property. So if I zoom in here, this is actually a diagram from our of solar patterns. So I can turn that guy on and off. We've got some wind patterns over here, talking about the distribution of wind throughout the year, as well as the prevailing winds for every month of the year. We've got all of the historical climatic and temperature data going back to 1981. So we can look at all of our maximum and minimum temperatures, precipitation events. And we've got any charts that map out the precipitation and temperature distributions throughout the year. So you can have all this information, and anything else you want, you can pull into this program through adding in image overlays. And there's also some amazing plugins that you can have available to you to help identify different things called climate analogs. So the entire world has been mapped for something called the Köppen-Geiger climatic classification zones, which is basically looking at all of the world's climates through various metrics and trying to find similar climates from different geographical regions. So you can see here this color here corresponds to DFB. That's actually the color that of the climate classification zone that we exist on our farm. So if I turn this map on here, so that's where our farm is, in that little zone there. And again, this is a free tool that's built into the plugin that you can get at www.contourmapgenerator.com. So when we're diagnosing our climate for our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, say one of the aspects of your vision and values is that you want to be completely self-sustainable with your food production, but specifically you want to be able to grow, say you're a vegetarian or a vegan or something like that, and that's really important to you. Well, by doing some basic climatic diagnosis, you can identify that in our climate, if you were living on our farm, that'd be really challenging, because for basically 8 months of the year we have frost that will kill anything that's growing outside. So that's a climatic weakness in relation to what your vision is. And so you need to create a design now that's going to help bridge the gap between that. So things like passive solar greenhouses, things like identifying microclimates, maybe even growing fungi as a protein source, because they have the ability to grow in cooler temperatures without sunlight. Other examples are in the mountain areas. You might have really low sunlight conditions that might also create a challenging environment for food production year round. But again, these are just some of the examples of just a few of the exercises that you can do for example, for climate. Now, if we pull down to geography here, I want to highlight another tool that Rob, Michelle, and I have created, with the partnership with a GIS programmer from Uruguay. His name is Danilo, a fantastic guy. We actually created an online contour map generator program, which you can find at www.contourmapgenerator.com. And you can download a free contour map for anywhere on the planet so that you can diagnose various geographical metrics on your property for the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats they pose to your vision and values. So this is the topographical map for our farm here. You can see this is our home site here. And actually, I'm going to turn on some of the boundaries here that we've got for our property. Oops. There. So this is just another image that you can import in. So for a lot of places in the world, the Google Earth imagery isn't great, but with this program, you have the ability to import in your own air photos or air images so that you can do a better job of designing your property based on current photos. So this is some of the free contour map data, but we also have the ability to import in different data, things like LiDAR. So this is a map of our home quarter section here that shows some of the LiDAR data. I'm just going to turn the contour maps off here. This is just a better or higher quality data set. And with that data set, as well as the free contour data set, you have the ability to generate different image overlays, things like solar radiation, things like your water catchment, showing where the valleys are in your property and the corresponding catchments, water catchment areas for each of those valleys. You can look at the different slope areas on your property. So the orange and yellows are a higher, steeper slope than the darker greens. The darker green is basically flat ground, whereas the yellows and oranges are anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees slope, which is really great for identifying opportunities like microclimates, and but also for identifying threats and weaknesses to accessing potential parts of your property. If you've got a really steep area that's hard to build a road across, these maps will help you identify that. You can also take a look at things like slope overlay, aspect maps, which corresponds to the direction that the land is facing. So the red is facing to the west, the blue is facing to the north, yellow is south, green is east. And what's really cool about these maps and any imagery that you bring in is that you have the ability to toggle on different layers, or so different overlays and the transparencies associated with them. So for example, you can have an air photo beneath an overlay, and just like you would with vellum paper when you're designing by hand, you can toggle that on and off so that you can see beneath it and help identify microclimates. So one of the ones I'd like to point out, which I'll talk about shortly here, is you see this curvy line here that stretches across our property. That's 1.5 kilometer long swale that we built. And the reason we built it there was that it happened to go through a really great microclimate on our property. So this is south-facing land that just so happens to be, sloping. Again, you can see it. That contour line there is just underneath it. It's sloping, 10 to 15 degrees towards the south, and it's positioned within the overall contour map of our property. Actually, it's easier to see with these guys. So the red is the highest part on the property, and the blue is the lowest part. And that swale there exists in what's known as the thermocline, which is basically the best microclimate you can find on your property for wind protection and a moderated temperature zone. So these maps can help you to identify, some amazing opportunities on your property, but also some of the potential threats that exist within the geography on your land. And you can get all the stuff via the free contour map generator, or you'll be able to get the free contour map data, which then if you have access to a GIS developer, a programmer, he can help you to generate those other image overlays, the things like the slope, the aspect, and the watershed maps. Now, part of our guided and guaranteed program is that we have our own GIS developer that we work with, and we'll help you to develop a set of your own maps for your property. So that you can get the contour map data for free, but as part of the guided and guaranteed program, including that is a whole suite of these maps so that you can do a better job of diagnosing your entire resource base for its ability to meet your vision without sacrificing your values. Now, some of the exercises that I want to highlight here are identifying where some of your ridges and valleys are in your property. And again, you can do that through understanding where your contour lines are. So if I pull this guy up here, one of the exercises we have people do is identify where the ridges are. They're in red. You can see a ridge there, ridge there, ridge there, and then the valleys that are associated with that. And the reason they're doing that is because of the next item that we try to diagnose with our system, which is water. So if I turn this guy on, we can identify that, we've got, these are the major water flows that come through our property. And we know that through, long-term pattern observation, because we've lived on this property for, close to 40 years. And before that, there's people in my family, my lineage that have lived on land around us for more than 100